This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Welcome into another edition of Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you live in the Matt Black Kia Studios here on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, 97.3 ESPN.com, and live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 973 ESPN. A lot to get to here as we lead you at the Flyers hockey top of the hour. Flyers take on the Penguins right here on your home for Flyers hockey, 97.3 ESPN. Kevin Durso is going to join us to preview the game coming up over from 973 ESPN.com. It's his full preview. We'll get into all the details with Durso coming up at 6:20 tonight. Also, I'll get into my latest article of the day over at 973 ESPN.com, the 973 ESPN mobile app. But first, we were going to get into this Sixers game from last night. You know, I'm watching that game last night, and I know a lot of people today are talking about Joel Embiid, and frankly, they should be, okay? Frankly, they should be talking about Joel Embiid last night, and he played great. But let me tell you something. The Sixers don't win that game last night if two things don't happen. Number one, Dwight Howard had a 2-minute stretch that turned the entire vibe of the game. It felt like for the entire second and third quarters that the Jazz were just dictating the pace of the game. They were controlling the entire game. And then what does Dwight Howard do? He comes out, he hits a three-pointer, he gets a steal, then he gets a block, he gets an assist, he goes to the line, and you're like, wait a minute, it became the Dwight Howard show. I felt like I went back in a time machine to like 12 years ago when Dwight was just doing Dwight stuff down in Orlando. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really fun. This is interesting. And it felt like that moment, that 2-minute stretch by Dwight Howard, changed the entire game. It was amazing that this guy who has been maligned, belittled, criticized for years. You know, Dwight Howard was treated like this washed up dude for years when he went to the Lakers and went to the Rockets. He was never the same, blah, blah, blah. And then he finally took this, said, look, I'm going to be a role player with the Lakers. I am going to be part of the supporting cast. I don't need to start. I don't need to be a star. The moment he was able to come out and say that was the moment that he changed his game. He changed how people viewed him. And he came to the Sixers, and he's basically some amalgamation between an older Dikembe Mutombo and Rick Mahorn. Because half the time he's out there, he's playing great defense and just crashing the boards. And the other half of the time, he's just plowing into people, acting almost like an enforcer at times. And I love it. He's out there. He's to be a leader. He's a part of the team. And his play for those 2 minutes changed the entire momentum of the game. If he doesn't have that stretch of time there, they don't have a chance to win that game. The other guy who was integral to the win last night was Tobias Harris. The dude just said, give me the ball, get out of my way, we're going to win this game. And he just dominated the overtime. Dominant in the overtime. There were so many times that he went mano-a-mano with the guys, and he just took their lunch. You know, for all the people who complain about Tobias Harris, that was the game I loved last night. That was a game where Tobias Harris literally just told the entire world that hates on him they take a long walk on a short pier. He really did. I mean, honestly, he probably would have said something else, but I can't say it on the radio because of FCC violations. But still, Tobias Harris went out there in that overtime and said, we are not losing this game. I am here to win. And the Sixers, in many ways, stole a victory that the Jazz should have won. Now, I'm not going to sit here and get into the should there have been foul calls, should not have been foul. Look, I heard what Donovan Mitchell said after the game. I've read what people have said about the game afterward. Listen, there were bad calls all night long. There were calls that should have been made that were fouls for Embiid and against Embiid. There were foul calls that should have been made that were for Dwight Howard and against Dwight Howard. There were foul calls being made and not being made all night long. So I can't buy into this idea that Donovan Mitchell says that the league isn't fair when it comes to the Jazz. So I'm not buying into that garbage. The Jazz lost the game. You don't let the Sixers come back in that situation. It doesn't matter how many chances they have. You guys seal the deal. And the Jazz didn't seal the deal in the fourth quarter and let the Sixers back into a win in overtime. So to me, the two guys that deserve a ton of credit last night are Tobias Harris and Dwight Howard. Because without them, Joel Embiid's big night would have just been another footnote in the season. Joel Embiid has had a lot of great nights this year. He's a lot of games where he's gotten at least 30 rebounds, at least 10 rebounds and 30 points in a game. He's been phenomenal this year. He's an MVP candidate for sure. Some people say he is the leading candidate for MVP. But I'm telling you right now, there's a huge difference between Embiid and Jokic. Statistically, you could say that Jokic is having a better season in terms of his overall stat lines. But as you've heard me say here on 97.3 ESPN in the past, MVP stands for valuable. I don't need the guy who has the best stats. I need the guy who's most valuable to his team. The guy, when you take him off the floor, they struggle. This year, the Nuggets are 20-15 with Jokic on the floor. The Sixers are 23-7 with Embiid on the floor. The Bucks are 20-14 with Giannis on the floor. The Nets are 17-6 with Harden on the floor. So Embiid, of all those guys, has the most wins. All right? He also has the fewest losses outside of Harden, who's played less games than Embiid. But still, those are some impressive numbers. That means when those guys are on the court, their teams have a chance. And you can argue the Sixers have the best chance when their guy is on the floor compared to other teams. That's a big deal. Listen, LeBron last year should have his MVP season. I was debating this last year on the radio, that LeBron leading the league in assists, being that force of nature last year. Giannis only won because of the analytics, okay? The analytics crowd won Giannis the MVP last year when it should have been LeBron. I'm not giving LeBron the MVP this year because you owed it to him last year. That's a bunch of garbage. Embiid should be the leading candidate. And to me, if there's anybody in second place, I honestly got to lean Kawhi, actually, because Kawhi has been a monster this year when he's actually played. I know he's missed 7 games. I believe it was 7 or 8 games this year, whatever it is. But when he's played, he's been an absolute monster. To me, if it's Embiid, it's Kawhi, and it's Jokic, I don't even have LeBron on my MVP conversation anymore. I think that there's something to be said for the fact that I think that LeBron, for how great LeBron has been this year and in his career, there are moments in games where it feels like that he's saving steam for the end of the year, that he's saving momentum for the final stretch of the season. And I don't hold that against him, but I look at Embiid and I feel like that guys like him and Kawhi are much more committed to the here and now than LeBron is a little bit, but that's just my opinion. 609-403-0973 is text to get on the conversation. 609-403-0973. Also, you can comment on the stream as you watch on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 973 ESPN. We are streaming live here on GameNight on 973 ESPN. Coming up in about 10 minutes from now, our Flyers Insider Kevin Durso will join the show to get more into the Flyers back in action tonight. A surprise Flyer will not be playing tonight. You can find out who that is coming up in just a bit. It's one of those deals where this COVID-19 stuff is... Look, I wrote about this at 973 ESPN.com earlier this week. There's this whole situation with COVID-19, the pandemic, and these protocols are really becoming as disruptive as the pandemic itself, the protocols. And listen, at some point, nobody wants to answer the tough questions that are being asked. And because they're not answering the questions, there's not much we can do about it. All right? We don't have an explanation for why some of the stuff that's happening the way it is, but it looks like one of the Flyers' best players will not be available tonight. We'll talk with Kevin Durso about that coming up in just about 10 minutes from now. The other thing I wanted to get to here before we hit the break So Mike Gill and Bob Wankel, and Mike Gill and I talked about this a little bit during the 5 questions segment. This situation with Odubel Herrera is a very interesting test when it comes to how people view athletes. Bob Wankel earlier today on the Sports Bash talking about Odubel Herrera.
I kind of wondered, is this just a kind of like an all for show? Is this a CBA thing? But to me, it looks like they're giving him a real chance to redeem himself, with his teammates and with this organization and ultimately with the fan base. We'll see if he's able to do it. But, you watch that game today and it's hard not to look at him and say, man, there's some upside.
And listen, we know that Odubel Herrera is talented. He was an all-star. He has ability. He has talent. And I'm not going to be one of these people who turns around and says, he shouldn't be on the team. I'm not drawing some crazy line here with any of this stuff. What I am going to do is caution everybody. I remember very vividly the entire Michael Vick situation about how there were people who didn't want the Eagles signing him. There were people who said, you abuse dogs. I will never root for the Eagles again. And I'm not to belittle the Michael Vick thing because obviously it was a serious thing. But to me, domestic violence is another tier of problems. Okay? There's never a scenario where a man should lay his hands on a woman like Odubel did. I don't care if he went to counseling. I don't care if she took him back. To me, there are certain patterns in people's lives that are indicative of who they are. And Odubel may have gotten counseling. He may be rectifying redemption. He may have paid his dues or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, this situation is not going away if he makes this team. If he's on this roster, the Odubel stuff will hang around this team just the way the Michael Vick stuff hung around the Eagles. And listen, Odubel's going out there and playing well. He smashed a home run today. He started a couple games already in spring training. If he can play the way he has in spring training or the regular season, there's no reason why he's not on this team. And I want to remind you all that, as a society, we pick and choose who we want to give forgiveness to, right? People want to forgive certain athletes for certain things, others for other things. And I'm not here to preach, any type of morality or righteousness here on the radio, but I am here to caution you that for every person who sits there and says that Odubel should never play in the Major League Baseball again, there's another person who is saying that Odubel should be given a second chance. And I'm just warning all of you that, listen, Odubel, he may earn his way on this roster. This may be a reality that every one of us is just going to have to deal with. We're just going to have to put up with it. And again, I personally am not a fan of Odubel being on the roster. I'm not one of these people who thinks that people should always be given a second chance. I've said it once and numerous times before. Anybody's listened to me at any point in time during my radio life, listen, I think that certain traits people have lead them to committing certain types of actions and behavior patterns. And typically somebody who is violent against people who are innocent victims on any level, whether it is domestic violence, whether it is dog violence, whether it is any type of, basically aggression toward an innocent person that is grossly above and beyond the actions of that individual is typically a sign of some other problem there, okay? I'm not going to get into the science of it. I studied this a little bit when I was in college. It was a big part of my formative years when I was, there was a time I wanted to go to law school, okay, for those who don't know. And my whole theory was I was going to be a sports agent. I was going to go to law school, blah, blah, blah. And there were a lot of things that I read and researched that I didn't realize before, and they're still part of me today. When I see domestic violence, when I see people making excuses for people, it makes me cringe, honestly. So this Odubel Herrera stuff isn't going to go away, but I will say, just remember, we pick and choose which morals and which depravity that we're okay with as a society. And in today's world, it seems like society is more twisted than ever when it comes to what is right and what is wrong. And part of that is Odubel Herrera being on the field and the issues of what he did not being discussed at all, which is a problem in and of itself. Outside of Mike Gill and Bob Wankel on the Sports Bash, I'm right here on Game Night with yours truly, Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Happier topic, Flyers coming up next, back on the ice versus Penguins. Can they get the win tonight? Well, they'll have to do with one of their best players, Kevin Durso, our Flyers Insider, joins me next here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City for all your Eagles, Sixers, Flyers, NFL, and, of course, high school sports coverage over at 97.3 ESPN.com as well. And don't forget, we are live in the Matt Black Kia Studios on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Follow the social media platforms to watch the Sports Batch with Mike Gill and Game Night with Josh Hennig each and every week. One of the things I love about betting on basketball with FanDuel Sportsbook is I'm always finding new player props and game lines. And what's cool about FanDuel Sportsbook is you can combine those props with other bets from the same game to score an even bigger payout. It's called a same game parlay bet, and you can only find them with FanDuel Sportsbook. You can combine point spreads, player props, over-unders, and more into a same game parlay to get a big payout on a small bet. And right now, new and existing users can get up to $25 in site credit back each day if your parlay falls one leg short with same game parlay insurance. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today and sign up with my promo code Hennig to try the same game parlays and get the same game parlay insurance. That's promo code Hennig when you sign up with FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 in order to play and present in NJRPA. Refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max refund $25. See sportsbook.fanduel.com for full terms, conditions, and details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Flyers hockey coming up tonight. Brought my Flyers hat to work today for Kevin Durso for the segment here. Yeah, I wore the Phillies hat earlier in the week for McCormick, so I decided to wear the Flyers hat this week as well for Durso. I missed it on Tuesday, so I was hoping I can make it up to Durso. He joins us live on the Boardwalk kind of hotline here on 97.3 ESPN as the Flyers will be without one of their best scorers tonight. Kevin, give us the update on what is going on with the Flyers because an unexpected player will not be playing tonight.
Yeah, so two big pieces of news that came out in the last hour or so, basically, when the COVID list update came out. Sidney Crosby was activated from the list. He's going to play tonight, and that comes after Mike Sullivan had said this morning he wasn't going to be available. They also had an assistant coach, Todd Reardon, who was not available for Tuesday's game because he was in protocol. He's out as well, so he's able to coach behind the bench as well. So everything clears up for Pittsburgh, but for the Flyers, Joel Farabee is now on the list again. So there's another player back on the list for the Flyers, and they're back into a situation all of a sudden, it appears, because now we're back to monitoring what happens in the coming days. But Farabee is out tonight, and that's a new player who wasn't part of the previous outbreak that this team had, who now has to go through this process, and it takes him out of the game. And, of course, it's a huge loss because not only is he one of the team's top performers this year, 10 goals, 19 points this season. He's had an outstanding season to this point, but he had the only 2 goals of the game 2 nights ago, and he's not available tonight now.
Now, you and I have talked about this before, so let's give it just a quick refresher course for the listeners or watchers on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Obviously, just because someone is not available because of protocol doesn't mean they tested positive per se. There's a variety of reasons why they are not in there. If you could just kind of do a quick review of some of the reasons why someone might not be available under the protocols.
Yeah, so take Crosby as a good example here because he was not available. We found that out on Tuesday, so that was news that came out that morning. He was going on the COVID list. He was out for Tuesday's game. He was on the COVID list again on Wednesday, and now he's off the list. That could very simply be a contact tracing issue where he needed to just produce multiple negative tests to return, and 2 days later he's back. The Rangers had a very similar situation as well last week when they played the Flyers. Keandre Miller was on the list for a couple days, came right back a couple days later. So it can happen that way. Obviously, I think the fear here is that we obviously know what just went on with the Flyers not too long ago. And it started with something like this. It started with 1. It turned into 7 on the list. They just got back to full strength. I think I just tweeted about it too. 4 days basically of having nobody on the list where you were able to say this lineup can be at full strength. They played one game with the full strength lineup because the day that Travis Konechny came off the list, it was Sunday, but the Flyers played in the afternoon, so it was too late to take any action involving him. They had a day of practice time to get him kind of back into a rhythm and get back into the lineup a little bit, and then they had the game on Tuesday, and that's it. And then the only other day that they didn't have anybody on the list was Wednesday, when, again, they had a bit of a day off and took some time away from the ice just to regroup and refresh, and now they're supposed to be coming back for a game, and just like that, they lose one of their top players. So it's unfortunate.
It definitely is unfortunate, and I think it's just I feel like there's a very important thing to keep clarity out there when it comes to what's going on, because when you think about the world we're living in, obviously there's a lot of things we don't know about some of this stuff, and I think part of what we don't know is part of what's frustrating, right? It's the fact that we don't have all the information. For example, the NHL has not given out as much information as some other sports have in terms of what is going on with these players. Like, for example, in the NFL, we found out that what happened with the Titans and the Ravens during the season was there were people in the building who violated protocols, and that's why they had outbreaks. We don't get that kind of information as vividly from the NHL. So, a lot of this is kind of us just, piecing together puzzle pieces, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing about it is that, a great point here is, where could Joel Farabee have gotten it if he were to test positive, let's say? And it's obviously speculation, but if he were to test positive, where could he have gotten it? This team's been on a road trip since the weekend. They went from Buffalo on Saturday, Sunday. They were out there already on Friday. So Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, Monday into Tuesday when they traveled to Pittsburgh. They've been in Pittsburgh the entire time. So where could he have gone? He's basically confined to the hotel. And so it either happens in a game setting, or which would clearly be a new piece of information as well, because then that would show it transfers during a game, and it can be passed along that easily. And granted, no other Penguins went on the list. Crosby was on and off in 2 days. No other Flyers have gone on the list. So what is the situation here? How did this happen? And that's the things, I think that's the lack of transparency that we have when it comes to the situation. We're stuck asking questions about, how does this happen? How does somebody go on the list? How does somebody get off the list that quickly? We're not getting that information. We're not even, I think, getting even reports of how often they're testing, and that's kind of where the lack of transparency is really a struggle at this point, because this is not the first time this has happened. It won't be the last time either. And it's understandable when it's a handful. I mean, look, the league has 3 players on the list total, and has for the last couple of days. It's the lowest it's been all season, and that's certainly a milestone to get to that point, because there have been outbreaks basically at every point of the season. But when you have a team that just went through one and a new player goes on the list that wasn't on there previously, it creates some questions, and you start to wonder what's going on. Like if this turns into 3, 4, 5 players again, and games have to be stopped again potentially, or whatever the case is, you might like seriously, what kind of investigation do you have to do to find out what's going on in Flyers headquarters here? What's going on at the practice facility? What's going on game days that is causing this to happen not only once, but twice now? So it's too early to speculate that, but obviously it's not too early to get too far ahead either, because you have a player on the list again, and now you're stuck watching and waiting and hoping for the best when it comes to the updates.
Kevin Durso, our Flyers Insider for 97.3 ESPN.com, joining us here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him at Kevin_Durso. Check out his full game preview over at 97.3 ESPN.com. This is the second of 3 games this week. The Flyers play the Penguins. So let's first touch on what happened on Tuesday night. You talked about on the website that in some ways the Penguins stole the Bruins formula against Hart, and we saw again, for what feels like a 200th time this year, somebody failing to get back on defense, Kevin.
It's a lot of the things, and I don't like to really classify it as doing, the formula against Carter Hart per se. It's the formula against the entire team, because when you're willing to go in and win the battles and skate faster and out-hustle a team, outwork them in all the dirty areas, then you're going to beat this team. That's basically been the bottom line at this point. It's what's made Boston successful, and it's what made Pittsburgh successful in this game. It was the same thing when the Flyers lost to a team like Buffalo right out of the gate at the very beginning of the season, 6-1. How do you lose a game 6-1 to a team like that? By not playing up to the standards that the other team is delivering, and that's hard work and high energy level and physicality that you're not able to match. And that's everything that Pittsburgh did. They handled the neutral zone very well. They didn't allow a lot in transition. They allowed the Flyers to get into the zone and get some shots on goal, but shots don't matter much when the chances match up really evenly. And I detailed that in the takeaways, that the chances were still relatively even at 5-on-5, even when you're taking a lot of shots. So the shot total does not matter in that sense at all. And defensively, you've just got to be better collectively. I mean, it really was that second period was really a gigantic snowball effect from the moment that Shane Gostisbehere turned the puck over at the blue line to basically making a direct pass to Kasperi Kapanen, who has such great speed that you weren't going to catch him. You knew it was trouble the second he had the puck on his stick, and he goes in and knew what to do with it. And from there, it just started to pile up. They took a penalty that led to a power play where they got scored on. They had another goal allowed where two players get right behind the two defensemen there. And again, that was Gostisbehere on the ice and Ivan Provorov, who didn't have a good game as well. And you're looking for those guys to bounce back. They need to be better, and they need to play up to the standards that they showed in the Buffalo weekend series that they had, because that's the standard that can win you games, even when it's not the best personnel. It's not like this, it's not like this can be the way it is all year. Teams are always looking to improve, and I'm sure the Flyers are out there trying their best to fill the void of a guy like Matt Niskanen still after all this time, but it doesn't happen overnight, and you've got to make the best of what you've got in front of you right there. And they obviously did not do that on Tuesday. They were not the better team in this game, and they can be. We've seen them play Pittsburgh better than that. They've got to get back to the basics and get back to the hard work, because that's really the formula that wins games.
When you also think about the defensive issues, obviously, we've talked about this before, the lack of a help for some of the linemen when it comes to when Couturier is on the ice or some of the other guys on the ice. There's obviously flaws. How do you fix that? Is there a way to fix some of these defensive lapses? Is it just personnel? Is it something the coaches can do? What can actually be done to fix these defensive problems?
The thing that can be done is getting back to the basics of it. Sometimes I watch this team too often try to go in offensively, at least, and do something that's way over the top and be too creative with it, when simplicity sometimes is the best formula. I don't think that the Penguins did anything outstanding in the game like that can't be stopped. What they did is they kept it simple. They took advantage in transition. They took advantage of mistakes made by the opposition, and they won the battles. And that's not the prettiest way to win games, but it is the way that you have to win in this league. And they came out motivated. They came out, I think, thinking that people thought they had no shot in the game because Crosby was out. And they played the opposite of that. They played like they knew that game was theirs for the taking. Some of it, I will say, probably is feeding off of the crowd a little bit. It was the first game with fans back in that building, and I'm sure that gives them a boost, especially when the Flyers' power play struggled. And that's another area that needs to improve. Power play, and I know there's a lot of people out there that point out the coaching staff, and they go to the assistants who run power play and penalty killing when special teams aren't going well. It's about, this was a big topic, and Broads and I actually discussed this on the latest episode of Open Ice Hits because Montreal was going through it. Montreal's GM, Mark Bergevin, just had this whole thing about accountability in a press conference, and everybody knows that they have to be better, and it's on the players. He's put by making coaching changes and things like that, you're just trying to give the team the best resources. But the players have to be the ones that go out and execute. And that was a game where it was total lack of execution in a lot of areas. They didn't do anything right on the power play, realistically. They kept possession for some decent amounts of time, but the execution was off there. Their penalty kill got scored on, which creates a lopsided result on the scoreboard because you didn't take advantage of 5 power plays that you had against a team that was ranked 29th in penalty kill going into that game. They come in tonight now ranked 25th, so that quickly their ranking went right up 4 spots because of one successful game. And you've just got to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And the Flyers weren't able to do it. It came back and haunted them later in the game. And now you got to go back to the basics of it and figure out the best way to work out your power play and work out your defensive struggles, because that team took it to you on Tuesday night. No question about it.
Some fans may say because of their experience with other sports, Kevin, that, they need to make a trade. They need to make a move. In the NBA, I feel like every day we're talking about a new trade target for the 76ers. Every day we're talking about who's going to be drafted by the Eagles in the draft. Hockey's a little different, I know, but is there somebody out there that they could make a trade for to maybe bolster the defensive line pairings or do something about some of the guys who are on the ice now who are maybe not able to get back to those basics you talked about?
Well, and yeah, there's guys out there, sure. I mean, one of the names that's been out there a lot in recent days is Matthias Ekholm from Nashville, who, I mean, there was a whole report out about how Nashville had scouts at the Lehigh Valley Phantoms game to watch the minor league team, which created a buzz about trade talk and things like that. I think the issue here is not about players that are out there or not out there for the Flyers to be able to look at and try to improve the defensive core. It's not a matter of guys not being out there. It's a general lack of urgency among the league to make a deal without making the price tag too high at the moment. There's no reason for teams to be making trades right now, because even Nashville right now, who is sitting 6th place in the Central, 8 points out of a playoff spot, normally you would get to a point in the season where you're nearing the halfway point and you go, okay, you start to chalk it up that it's going to be a selling year for them. But not this year, because you're going to play all those divisional opponents, and one good run of 5 games can totally change your season around. And that's where they are right now, is trying to figure out whether or not they're going to be there. And there's still a month until the deadline too, so the deadline breeds the action at that point. So right now, a lot of stuff is in a holding pattern, and there's not going to be much of a way to rectify that and to go out and just make a move for the sake of making a move. It doesn't work that way, and it's not going to be a quick fix. And that's really the thing that people have to understand right now, is you've got to accept this team for what it is on the ice, and you have to accept, or on paper too, I should say, because on the ice, there's improvements that can be made. They can play better in a lot of areas, but you've got to accept what it is on paper, because it's not getting an improvement overnight at this point. So they have to go and take care of those issues, work through everything they've done so far. Quite honestly, I think it's miraculous that this team is where they are right now, given everything they've gone through. Injury to Sean Couturier, injury to Phil Myers, that were both relatively long-term in a shortened season, and then the COVID situation where they played multiple games without half of their lineup. And to still come out on the other side, to still be sitting in a playoff spot with a lot of games in front of you that you can make up on the other divisional teams, it says a lot about the character of this team and what they can be. It's now about trying to see it with a full lineup, and unfortunately, given what happened with Farabee tonight, it's not going to allow for us to get another chance to see what this team is like at full strength. So that's the struggle with it, is that we really want to, like, we look at this team and we say there's things out there that could help them, but it's really hard to gauge where they are with a fully healthy lineup, because we have rarely seen it this season.
Kevin Durso, our 97.3 ESPN.com Flyers Insider, joining me here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. All your Flyers and NHL coverage. Again, the Flyers 11-5-3 coming into the game tonight. Penguins 12-8-1 coming into the game tonight. Hear all the action at 7 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, one thing we do know for sure about tonight, Brian Elliott is back in goal. Elliott having a really good season, a little sneaky out there. 5-1. He's got the nice save percentage of over 93. The goals against average looks pretty sweet. What has been the difference between him and Carter Hart in goal this year?
It's hard to say what the difference between the two of them is, because they've both given up goals that they probably would like to have back. Elliott's been really sharp this year, I definitely will say, and his numbers speak to that. I actually think that part of it is that this team plays a different way in front of Brian Elliott than they do in front of Carter Hart, and I don't know why that would be. You should be playing the game the same way no matter who's in goal and who else is on the ice, but I think that they've put Carter Hart in some bad situations, not just in terms of the opponent. Like I said, and I'm not trying to say that means that he's only good. He's good against everybody else and not good against Boston only, because he didn't look, I don't want to say he didn't look good on Tuesday. It wasn't his fault. The rest of the team kind of left him out to dry there, but that's the point. It's the play in front of him has as much to do with the results as it does his own play. And just because Carter Hart's numbers don't look good against Boston, the team doesn't play well against Boston. That's why it looks so bad. And the team didn't play well on Tuesday defensively to give him any help. So that's why he had a rough game against Pittsburgh when he's been playing well against everybody in this division. Brian Elliott is giving you something right now that Carter Hart's not at the moment, which is somehow or other, it seems like every time he's in net, you're getting a game where defensively this team is stable. There's no rhyme or reason to it, but this team is playing a more stable game when he's in net. And I think that there's just, I don't know if it's a calming presence. I don't know if it's more of an effort to try to make sure he doesn't have to make the high percentage saves, and they think that Carter Hart can, so they, let their guard down a little bit or whatever it is, but it just seems to be that way. So they go to Brian Elliott because the numbers seem to favor him right now, and I'm not surprised by this. I wouldn't be surprised if, depending on the result of this game, if they find a way to win this game, if he's not back in goal for Saturday afternoon, and you hold out for Carter Hart to go back in net on Sunday night when they play for the first time with fans back in the building at Wells Fargo Center, because that would be certainly what a lot of people would love to see, and I'm sure that would give Carter Hart a bit of a boost as well. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's the rotation going into the weekend, but that remains to be seen. Right now, you got to focus on this game tonight, and Brian Elliott's the guy in goal, and he's given you everything you could ask for this season, so why not see if he's got another one in him tonight?
Yeah, it's kind of what I was going to ask you next. So where do you go with the goalie rotation? Because after the Penguins series, you come back home, you play the Capitals, you play Buffalo, you play the Caps again a couple times, and then you hit the road again. Would this maybe be a situation where you turn the heart and say, listen, because everything has happened this year, maybe we play him more at home and Elliott more on the road as we get through the dog days of March with this crazy schedule.
Possibly, but I don't think you have that luxury either because the games are just so close together that you're going to have to pick and choose when you play them. Like, there's one of the parts of that 4-game road trip that comes after the 4 games at home next week is a back-to-back, and you won't be playing Brian Elliott in both of those because he's playing better on the road or vice versa. I think you're going to have to pick and choose your battles there, look at who's playing against who. Like, a great time to get Brian Elliott a home game is probably that Buffalo game because he's got such great career numbers against Buffalo. And he even answered a question about this over the weekend. There's not really a reason why he plays so well against Buffalo, but he does. And he's got 2 shutouts against them this year. Why wouldn't you, for that one game, give Carter Hart the break right there and then say, come back for the weekend and play Washington? Carter Hart's played well against Washington his entire career as well. So you can set yourself up nicely for that. I think that that's what you're going to lean towards more, is playing the guy who has the better career numbers or the better recent showing against the team that you're playing that night, rather than whether or not it's home or away or trying to pinpoint an exact schedule based on what day it is.
Makes a lot of sense. He's Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider for 97.3ESPN.com. Check out his preview over on the website. He gets a game recap right after the game each night. Also on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, where you can listen to the game as well. 7 o'clock, Tim Saunders, Steve Coates, and of course, Kevin Durso is also the co-host of the Open Ice Hits podcast. And as all guests, he appeared on your radio and on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Kevin, great stuff today.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to your thoughts out there at 609-403-0973 on the text board. Of course, you can comment on the show as you watch on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as well. Don't forget my FanDuel Sportsbook picks of the night coming up in just about 10 minutes from now. We went 2-0 last night on the picks. And by the way, we covered the one by half a point. So I don't know what you want to qualify that as. Is that a good beat? Is that a lucky beat? I don't know what you want to call that. But we did cover the games last night barely. So we got that coming up for you about 10 minutes as well here on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Again, as I said, you can listen to the Flyers game right there on the app. And also at 97.3 ESPN.com, all of your coverage of Eagles, Phillies, Sixers, Flyers, high school sports, and more here at South Jersey's home for all your sports, 97.3 ESPN. And we are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show, Game Night with Josh Hennig, the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. Just follow 97.3 ESPN on social media.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Hanging out with you all. Of course, text board is open as always at 609-403-0973. And if you're watching the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you comment as well. Don't forget, show being brought to my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Add a little excitement to your sports watching experience by betting all the action with FanDuel, where you get same-game parlays. That's right, same-game parlay insurance. You can bet the over-unders, spreads, player props, money lines, whatever you want with FanDuel Sportsbook. You can get it all in one place. Make a small bet and turn it into a big payout. Don't forget, FanDuel is letting you place your first bet risk-free up to $1,000. Just place a bet on any game, and FanDuel will refund you up to $1,000 back if you don't win your first bet. Sign up now when you download the FanDuel Sportsbook app or go to sportsbook.fanduel.com and use my promo code Hennig for your first risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code Hennig on FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 or to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. For full terms and conditions, see sportsbook.fanduel.com. Of course, we'll get to the pick in just a little bit here on 97.3 ESPN. So I want to just follow up on something that Kevin Durso mentioned. So with the Flyers game tonight, looks like no Joel Farabee tonight for the Fly guys. So in many ways, that means that this is going to be a very interesting game to watch, because Elliott has had a good year as a goaltender, but you're without one of your best offensive players for this game tonight. The Penguins are getting back Sidney Crosby. So a lot of moving parts going on here with this Flyers game tonight. It's going to be a very interesting to see how they come out of this. And they still have one more game on Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. You hear that game right here as well on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. I got to think that the Flyers are going to use this game tonight as an opportunity to evaluate some things. That's kind of how I look at this game, honestly. I think that they're going to look at this game and be like, look, we have an idea of who we are, but now we're going to try to see who we are without certain situations going our way. We lost a game we could have won if we would have gotten back to the fundamentals. They didn't win it. Now you got to move on. How do you move on? Well, we're going to find out how they can move on tonight. And of course, all the action top of the hour here on 97.3 ESPN. Tim Saunders, Steve Coates on the call here on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Josh Hennig here in the Matt Black Kia studios on 97.3 ESPN. I wrote an article over at 97.3 ESPN.com today. The news came out that the Professional Fighters League is returning to Atlantic City this season. They were back in AC in 2019. Obviously, there was no PFL season last year because it was more cost effective for them to not have a season last year than to try to work through the COVID pandemic because of certain financial commitments they have. And this summer, they're actually going to be in Atlantic City for the entire year. And, I still, at this moment, I reached out personally to the PFL people about what is going on with the fan attendance. Their initial claim was they're not doing anything right now. And the irony is that I asked the same question to the MAC, the college basketball tournament. It's going to be in AC next week. It's the same thing. And their first reaction was also, we're not going to have fans. A few days later, after I asked that question, they corrected courses. Oh, no, we're going to have fans, but they're going to be friends and family of the teams. That's why we're not selling tickets. So they kind of changed course a little bit. So I'm wondering if the PFL just hasn't considered the idea of fans at this point. But I hope that they change that because this is going to be the second major event, sporting-wise, in Atlantic City since the COVID-19 pandemic, PFL MMA. And for those who don't know PFL is the number 2 MMA organization in the world. The quality of the fights, the quality of the product they put on television and in the arena is only second to the UFC. There is a level of intensity with these fights because these guys are fighting to not just win the fight, but they get graded on how they win the fight, which allows them to have higher points in the standings. And, of course, only a certain number of fighters make the cutoff to make it into the postseason. This is literally a regular season in the PFL. So there's a sense of urgency with these fights. These aren't just guys going out there who, they might have been good at one point. No, these are usually either guys who want to test themselves, who could be in the UFC, or there's somebody who is an up-and-comer who might end up in the UFC, like former UFC interim champion Justin Gaethje in the UFC now had a championship run in PFL when it was formerly known as World Series of Fighting. PFL style is very unique, and that's why guys like Anthony Pettis, the former UFC lightweight champion, and former heavyweight contender Justin Willis want to compete in PFL because the style of the tournament interests them. Both of them could be in the UFC. The UFC didn't cut them. They decided not to renew their contract with the UFC, and they decided to go to the PFL. So this is a great product, and I hope they change course and go along with New Jersey and other states are doing, which is having limited attendance because, first of all, you don't have to have a ton of people in Ovation Hall for it to have a good crowd, okay? I know it's a smaller arena, but there's a little bit of an intimacy that comes with it. And as someone who's been in there for multiple events, I feel like PFL could do a great in-arena and television product, serve everybody involved. And secondly, Atlantic City needs these events coming back to town. Last summer was tough on a lot of people. And I know the state is slowly opening up. We're slowly getting back to normal. And if the PFL is saying, look, we're going to spend our entire regular season at Ocean Resort. We're going to spend our entire regular season in Atlantic City, all 6 events in one spot. Why not find a way to get fans in the building to add a little extra juice for the fighters? Because, listen, there's a huge pick-me-up when we saw the UFC fights in Abu Dhabi with the fans in attendance for the McGregor-Poirier fight versus the, for lack of a better term, the mutedness of the Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns fight. It's just a completely different vibe, and I would love to see the PFL fighters and the fans of MMA have the opportunity to bring back what we so miss when it comes to sports in Atlantic City, which is the fan attendance. All right, time for my FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night. Again, you can check out my full article about the PFL return to Atlantic City over at 973ESPN.com right now. But right now, we're going to get to my FanDuel Sportsbook picks of the night. I want to start with the Heat versus the Pelicans. The Heat currently are only -1.5 favorites in this game. And I'm going to take that number outright, and here's why. The Pelicans have already shown us they have a very bad defense. They're allowing 116 points per game. And that game last night against the Bulls was not an anomaly. Let me tell you the points allowed by the Pelicans in their last 5 games. 118, 129, 117, 124, 128. This is a team that can't play defense if their life depended on it. I like the Heat and their ability to win games. They have 1 loss in their last 5, and that was a very close game where they just didn't shoot well for most of the game, and then the Hawks pulled away in that game. Otherwise, they're winning games, and they're winning games in very decisive manner. Easy for me to say. Goodness gracious. So give me the Miami Heat -1.5. And, of course, I mentioned the same game parlays with FanDuel Sportsbook. If I'm going to go with a same game parlay, I am going to go to the scoring category when it comes to the game tonight. When you're thinking about the game tonight, they have a line right now to score more than 20 points. To score more than 20, Lonzo Ball, you don't want to get him. You don't want to touch him at all. So who is actually going to score tonight? Well, we know the Pelicans can score a lot of points, and I think the guy might be Zion Williamson. I think Zion's going to have another big game tonight. You take that, you combine it with the Heat -1.5, you're going to get a 202 plus on the value. That's the juice for you on FanDuel Sportsbook. Thanks, Kevin Durso, for joining us to preview the Flyers game. Coming up next, Flyers, Penguins, Josh Hennig. This is Game Night. I'll catch you tomorrow.